Well, this is a curious thing, but you can have the assurance of God without the physical evidence, and even physical evidence that might, for many people, and perhaps you in the past, have spoken to the contrary. You can be in pain, but instead of worrying that the pain is going to be with you forever or get worse and worse or be the cause of your death, you can find you have an assurance that it's all right. I think you gain by that assurance by having seen God in your life so much that you just have a natural inclination to hope and trust. It's your default mechanism or whatever, when you might be suffering a pain and you think, my goodness, this is so-and-so, cancer or heart disease or something fatal or MS or, and whilst you're focused on that, my goodness, oh God, this could be serious and so on. But then, because the brain can really only think of one or two things at once, it's not that good at multitasking indefinitely. It loses its grip on some things, and even the pain at times, you're not thinking of it. You're overtaken by exhaustion or sleep or distraction or, and you suddenly realize, gosh, I've not been concerned about it. And not only that, but you can find you have a disposition that you now have assurance that it's somehow all right. You might think this is inexplicable, but perhaps it's explicable from the point of view this is your normal habit, and this is your default mechanism that you now drop into. That in the absence of some applied consciousness, you are living as if things are the assurance of God, because you've seen it in so many ways. If you like, you've meditated on it much, you've thought of it much, you've been aware of it much. You've spent your life, in recent times, say, especially, simply appreciating whatsoever is good and lovely around you. And you're used to having this assurance, this confidence. So now when you're confronted with even what might be tragic, foreboding, it isn't. Because you have a whole spiritual structure that simply is assurance of the goodness of God. How wonderful. Now, obviously this is a state you would like to be in, because after all, you do have to leave the planet sometime, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a bad way. You could go in your sleep, couldn't you? Or, it happens so quickly you don't see it coming and you don't notice it until oh my goodness, I've gone. I've left. Wow, didn't expect that. And your anticipation is then to be with God. Or, of course, we're all completely up the creek, and when you're dead, you're dead. Well, that's fine. At least you haven't lost anything. You haven't suffered to the bitter end, worrying about this. Do you see? The practice of whatsoever is good and lovely, think on these things, can give you an assurance that is your mode of being. It is who you are. I am the trust in God. It's what is conceivably behind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they're confronted with being thrown in the furnace. If they don't worship the king, they just say, well, if our God doesn't rescue us, still we will not worship you. And in some sense, there's an utter confidence and assurance that this is not something for them to be desperately wildly concerned about and therefore fall down and worship the king because he's insisting on it to avoid the fiery furnace. There's an assurance being referred to here that's greater than the possibility of concern for the fiery furnace. Wow, what's that about? What's being advertised about their way of life that's given them this assurance? Well, in Hebrew teaching, so to speak, it's presumably their godly way of living to date. There are wonderful examples of dedication to God. Well, you can be a wonderful example of dedication to God, not because you've mastered some correct theology, but because you love him, your God. You love your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength, because you have put your mind and your being to appreciating all the good that he's given, not just to you, but those around you that you love and care for, and in fact all life. This fantastic experience of living that we seem to share on this planet. The existence of the universe, the existence of the body. Fantastic complexity, absurd complexity. And our being, what is our being? We can't even, we just imagine it, don't we? We don't know what being is. We are it. Thought is a total mystery, isn't it? The words I speak, they pour out as if they're well chosen, but was I aware of the choosing? It just flows, doesn't it? No wonder you can have this assurance of the goodness of God, his power and his love and his benevolence, at the very least to you, because you are experiencing being you and living. We are the assurance of our God, our Dad. Wow. So you're not going to panic when, the result comes back from the medical practice and, sorry, you're suffering from so-and-so. Well, they don't even say sorry, they just say, we think you may be having such and such a disease, come in for further tests, and you think, no way. I mean, go in for further tests if you like, go down the medical path if you wish, but you might live in the assurance that it's all okay, whichever path you take, because God is greater than the decision I make. He's well able to care for the child, despite what the child does. He's God, for goodness sake, and I'm his child. I've come to that conclusion by long reflection on his goodness to me. My whole being is wedded to trusting him. How else can I live but to value all this loving kindness as of him and its continuance? It would be an abominable response not to trust him for all his goodness. Love you, Dad. So, blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine. How's it go? Heir of salvation, purchase of God, lost in his spirit, something like lost in his love. You have the blessed assurance. It comes quite naturally. you seek out whatsoever is good and lovely. Think on these things. Be filled with thanks and gratitude to him. And the blessed assurance, your birthright as a child of God, your God. Bless you. And you are blessed.